President Trump issued a number of executive orders. Some of these will be impacting California. My guest today is Travis Gillmore, who's a California reporter for Epoch Times. He's here to tell us which executive orders impact California the most and what the impacts will be.
I asked Governor Newsom about this, and he specifically said that he will not get in the way of federal legal action. And that really creates this sort of interesting situation where both federal, state, and local leaders need to come together, prioritize what's going to happen, and then figure out what the steps are from here.
I'm Siamak Korami. Welcome to California Insider. Travis, it's great to have you back on. Welcome back.
Thank you so much, Siamak. Always a pleasure to be here.
So you're a reporter with Epoch Times, and you've been covering Governor Newsom's office, and now we have a new president. President Trump is back, and there is some executive orders that are coming down, and California government has already been preparing to fight these executive orders. Can you tell us what's going on?
Yes. Hours after President Donald Trump took office for the second time, he signed unprecedented number of executive orders. And some of these specifically mention California. Others just have potential implications for the Golden State as well. And these range a variety of topics, everything from gender, energy, the border, security. It's kind of the gamut of what Trump would like to see done in his presidency. And several of these issues could potentially affect Californians.
And California has kind of been preparing to do a legal battle on this, right?
Absolutely. Moments after Trump was elected in November, Governor Newsom got together with his legislative colleagues and they called a special session. And the governor doesn't use the word Trump-proof, but this is a term that's been circulating in the media that California is trying to Trump-proof the state with this special session. And one of the things they did is allocated $25 million to this. Money will give the state's Attorney General, Rob Bonta, a little bit of leeway and some freedom to flexibility financially to navigate legal challenges. So things that he potentially deems are unconstitutional, he can challenge the Trump administration on. And we've seen just that. One of the executive orders that Trump passed has already been initiated some legal challenges and some reactions from the government.
And what are these executive orders? Can you get into them? Some of them could have really big impacts in California.
Absolutely. And the one that we're seeing a lawsuit on is one related to birthright citizenship. So the 14th Amendment in the Constitution has traditionally been interpreted that if someone is born in the United States, irregardless of their parents' status, that they would be conferred citizenship. Well, Trump has signed an executive order. He did this on his first day in office, and he's reinterpreting that. He's saying that actually being born in the United States does not necessarily guarantee citizenship, that this is dependent on the status of one's mother and father. And how this plays out remains to be seen. So as soon as the order was signed, we saw Attorney General Rob Bonta, in addition to approximately 24 other states' attorneys general, they joined together. We also saw some cities get in the mix, San Francisco included, and they filed a lawsuit asking for a temporary injunction to stop this birthright citizenship order. And what we've seen just in the last day is that a federal district court in Seattle, the judge has issued a temporary block. So the law wasn't going to take effect until February 19th anyways. It was already written the way Trump wrote it was in 30 days this would take effect. Well, now the judge has put a temporary pause. He said, we need 14 days to look at this and to determine whether legal challenge should stand, or as the judge says, and as Governor Newsom have repeatedly said, they feel that this is unconstitutional. They would like to see this blocked. And Trump's team has, on the other side, said that they also feel they have legal ground. So this is one of these really interesting situations where you have both sides, both have their legal experts, both think they're in the right. So it's really just going to come down to what court decisions can we have? And there's a lot of experts are feeling that this is a matter that's going to go all the way to the Supreme Court.
Now, there's another one that impacts California is the border one, right? There's a border. Can you tell us about that?
Yes. So he signed a series of border orders, and none of these are concrete in their terms. When you read through them, there's a little bit of openness and some interpretation. But what he's essentially saying is that the invasion at the southern border, and these are his words in the order, must stop. So he's ordered all law enforcement agencies at the federal level to repel anyone that's trying to come in illegally. It also orders to begin deportations. So as the Trump administration has repeatedly said, they want the worst first. So they're looking for violent criminals, people with a criminal record that includes things that violence or other atrocities to humans, not just low-level petty crimes, or not the crime of just coming into the country illegally. what he said is they're really prioritizing those with murder convictions, assaults, and things of that nature, or people that have come across, been deported, and have now come back into the country. The Trump team says they're prioritizing this. And we haven't seen much in the way of official statements yet, and this is understandable in terms of operational security. The Immigration and Customs Enforcement, law enforcement agencies don't want to forecast or don't want to let people know where their operations are taking place. We've heard unconfirmed reports that in sanctuary cities across the country, we are already seeing action. We've heard reports that this is happening in LA, nothing confirmed independently, and this is something that once these flights, and it's understood, Trump has asked the military and the National Guard to be involved in this. Once we get a little bit further down the road, we should see some actual numbers as to, okay, we saw these many people deported, and then a little bit of demographics. These are some of the criminals, or these are some of the crimes that were behind the people that were deported. But where that starts in California and where it ends, really nobody knows. If you look at the Public Policy Institute of California, they say we have 2 million illegal immigrants already in the state. So how many of those are in jeopardy of being deported? How many could potentially become under investigation? This all remains to be seen.
California is a sanctuary state, right?
We're seeing different things at different levels of government. So we are definitely we're seeing Huntington Beach in some areas saying absolutely they're in favor of what Trump wants to do in terms of immigration. We're seeing other areas that are fighting back and saying like local governments, saying they will not participate in any of these raids. I asked Governor Newsom about this, and he specifically said that he will not get in the way of federal legal action. And there was some really strong rhetoric coming from Tom Homan, President Trump's border czar, as well as from the president himself, basically warning that anyone that gets in the way of federal law enforcement actions could potentially be aiding and abetting a crime. And it appears that Newsom here is definitely steering clear of that. He is adamant that he would never interfere with federal action. But at the same time, he's open to a more compassionate approach, as he likes to call it, with some of these immigrants that are in the state. He does not want to see mass deportations. He has repeatedly reiterated that what he would like to see is a common sense approach. And it's really interesting, the idea of common sense here, when we hear this coming from the president and coming from the governor, it's like we all have the same ideas, different opinions on how to get to the same idea. And that really creates this sort of interesting situation where both federal, state, and local leaders need to come together, prioritize what's going to happen, and then figure out what the steps are from here. Because where we are now, we have some local leaders afraid, we have some local leaders that are excited about what potentially could come, and we have a lot of people in the middle that are they tell us they're uncertain. They really don't know where we're going from here.
Cartels were designated as terrorist organizations. Do you know what's the impact of that?
This could have really profound implications. So here in California, definitely we have a cartel presence. We've had several experts have come on the show and explain this. I've talked to Sheriff Matt Kendall in Mendocino County in the last week, and he's told me about some of this. So we have cartel activity in California on different levels. We have some human trafficking situations going on. We have illegal underground cannabis grows that are basically operated and run by multi-million-dollar criminal networks. And then we also have a fentanyl crisis, is what the government likes to describe it as here, where we're seeing thousands of Californians, all ages, backgrounds, and socioeconomic backgrounds, falling victim to this deadly opioid. And President Trump is really focused on stopping the flow of fentanyl into this country. So one of the reasons that he's designated these cartels as terrorist organizations, as he says that some of them almost operate in Mexico as quasi-government entities, where the government ends and where some of these cartels begin, is really gray area. And he's putting the pressure on this that the fentanyl needs to stop, the illegal human trafficking needs to stop, and these are all essentially profit-making activities for the cartels. When they transport people into the country from Latin America or throughout Mexico, they make thousands of dollars per individual. If you look at the fentanyl, the profit margins on fentanyl, these DEA agents have told us that they can make this stuff for pennies or less than penny a dose, bring it over here and make millions of dollars in profits, all while Americans and Californians are suffering. And this is really what Trump wants to stop. So by designating the cartels as a foreign terrorist organization, by also threatening 25% tariffs on Mexico and on Canada if the fentanyl flow doesn't stop, as well as an additional 10% on China if the fentanyl precursors don't stop flowing from Chinese manufacturers to other nations, this is an attempt in Trump's mind, not only a negotiating tool with the tariffs to force other governments to see things the same way he does, but with the cartels to really give some legal tools to our law enforcement experts. And Sheriff Matt Kendall in Mendocino County, he said he does believe that this designation could help, that these drug trafficking networks that we're seeing in California, he said it's been hot and cold in past years trying to get the federal government to cooperate and work with local law enforcement to really tackle a problem that is larger than a local sheriff's department can really handle. These are well-armed, very well-organized criminal organizations, and their leadership structure is decentralized. So if what the sheriff tells me is if they come and raid this farm or raid this one site, they might not get anyone who really has anything to do with the organization. These are all just people trying to make a living. Someone that's either been in a human trafficking situation or has been talked into performing some sort of daily activities to get this money. And it's an outsized problem that we really need the federal government's assistance in. And by making by designating a foreign terrorist organization, you open up the resources, you also strengthen the penalties and allow for more foreign negotiation to try to stop these actions before they get to California. One other aspect of designating cartels as foreign terrorist organizations is that it could give law enforcement the opportunity to go into cities that otherwise wouldn't allow them. So sanctuary cities that are not cooperating with federal law enforcement. As a terrorist organization, the feds can essentially just go right in there, conduct their operation, and deport or arrest whoever they need to arrest. The other thing, and this was brought up to Trump, was that this could allow the U.S. military to actually confront cartels in Mexico. And this, where I'm mentioning cartels in Mexico, it could be of any nation, but the ones that we specifically know of and are following in terms of fentanyl production and human trafficking, there's several cartels in Mexico that Trump is targeting. And this could allow operations inside of Mexico. When Trump was asked, he said stranger things have happened. So he likes to talk in generalities, and he likes to use his words as leverage in negotiation. So it still remains to be seen, is the military really plotting on taking down cartels in Mexico? This is a huge step from any other administration. We've never seen anyone actually try to take on the cartels head on with an order or a series of policies like this. And this could be a series of actions in the United States, across California, or this could be international geopolitical action to stop the flow of fentanyl and stop these dangerous cartels.
Our sponsor today is Shenyun. There's been some negative press on Shenyun recently. Shenyun's mission is to revive ancient and traditional Chinese culture. Shenyun Performance started by a group of Falun Gong practitioners in New York. Falun Gong is a spiritual and religious group which believes in living by truth, compassion, and tolerance, putting others first. The Chinese Communist Party, CCP, has been persecuting it since July of 1999 in China. Since Shenyun started, CCP has been targeting it in the US and across the globe by playing different kinds of schemes to cancel the shows or impact the performance. The current negative reporting originated from some Chinese social media accounts. And we know that CCP is given a new directive to go after Shenyun and Falun Gong in the US by turning the public opinion against them. If you hear something negative on Shenyun, make sure to do your own research and your own due diligence. Despite all of CCP's campaigns against Shenyun, the show has managed to grow significantly across the world. I highly recommend you go see it. I've been going to it for the last 14 years as they change the performances every year. They're coming back to California. Make sure you go see it. After the fires in LA, the water in Southern California coming into the news, which is that reservoir maybe had nothing to do with the water problems that we were facing in California. What are the executive orders on water?
So there was a water order that Trump put out basically saying to put people over fish. And there was an issue in Trump's first administration. He wanted to see more water flowing from the Sacramento region. Northern California is water rich. So coming out of the Lake Tahoe Sierra Mountains, it's just an abundance of water. Whereas the exact opposite in Southern California. You have the perfect climate down here, but there's not so much water. So the state delivers water from the rich areas or the water wealthy areas down throughout the state. What Trump wanted to do in his first administration was increase those water flows so that we would see more water coming down.
So they have the pumps, right? They could pump more water out of the delta, right?
Yes, absolutely. And this could benefit farmers on the way through the Central Valley. It could fill reservoirs in Southern California, potentially give more water down here. So the way Trump sees this is increase water flow, we could decrease fire risk in Southern California while also benefiting the farmers. Now, environmentalists in California, this has been an ongoing battle between water rights individuals, people who want to see water for communities and farms, and people who want to see environmental actions. And according to Trump, this water supply is diminished coming out of the San Joaquin Delta because the environmental agenda is to protect this Delta smelt, which is a fish. It's not on the food supply. No one likely has ever encountered this fish, but from some environmental perspective, there was a need to decrease water in certain rivers, streams, and systems in order to protect this fish. And maybe it can't deal with the flows. There's all these different scientific reasons why you might want to make these decisions. But once it's been made, now you have one perspective that says we're making decisions based on the life of this fish rather than the life of society and humanity, and that we need this water. So what Trump has ordered is for more of this water from the San Joaquin Delta to be delivered down to Southern California. Now, the order doesn't condition federal aid on following his request, but he has repeatedly said this over the last 2 days in different comments. And the question now is, how does California respond? If the state is forced to do one thing or another in order to receive federal aid, how does it respond? We asked Governor Newsom's office this. They said exactly as you said in the question, that these two water sources have nothing to do with the fires, that yes, we could get more water down through the Central Valley from the San Joaquin, but they're saying that this is an apples to oranges comparison, that there is no correlation between water in Northern California and the fires in Southern California. This is a difference of opinion between the state government and the federal administration. Trump has come back and said that even more adamantly that he wants to see the water from the Pacific Northwest used for California. He said that there's another executive order coming in addition to this people over fish order. Hasn't materialized yet, so we don't know the details of that. We've reached out to the governor's office. Everyone is in a wait and see approach, is what the lawmakers are telling us. No one really knows what the federal government wants at this time, and in the same vein, how to respond. So there is going to be a negotiation period as we go forward. And Trump is on the way here, could be landing right now in LA as we speak. So all this could change. Like as we tape right now, we know this is what Trump has said to this point. He's kept this trip closely guarded. No one knows what remarks he's going to make. And it's going to be very interesting to see how the governor and the president work together on this and other issues.
So Travis, the state leaders are saying we have enough water, but on the show, a lot of the farmers complain about not having enough water. And water agencies, we have interviewed certain water agency leaders in Southern California that say they don't have enough water, and there's initiatives to cut from them, so they have to figure out how to cut back and conserve. There's an element of, besides the fire, we have a shortage of water here.
Yes, and it's a huge issue. When you drive up and down the Central Valley, you see it everywhere. All of these farms with signs up saying one way or another their slogan that they need water, that water is how we produce food. And as California is essentially the breadbasket for much of the nation, water use here is vital. We have farms throughout the Central Valley. We have millions of people in Southern California that whether they want their yard or they just need for their average daily use, we've been told for the last 10, 20 years now to conserve water in this state. They're put in everything from and Trump has opposed all of this, the sprinkler heads, the shower, the faucets, everything is to lower consumption. So on one side, we're being told, yes, that we do have a water shortage, we need to conserve, and then we're also being told that we have enough water. So one of the other points of contention is that we do have what some estimate is trillions of gallons of water washing out into the Pacific Ocean every year. And this is one of the issues that Trump brings up repeatedly when he mentions his metaphorical valves that he wants turned on or off to bring water. He's just saying that if we're in a state where, or a situation where we're claiming to not have enough water, we should do everything we can to capture the water. And California is one of those states where we are water wealthy for part of the year. We have a true Mediterranean climate, especially in Northern California, where we get an abundance of water and then we have none. So it's not necessarily that we don't have water, it's a water management, a water storage issue.
And the dispute between, so the dispute is environmentalists say the water should go to the environment, and then others are saying the water should go to the farms and the
Yes, and to benefit the communities. And that's what Trump's order, the one that he's already signed, that's his demand, is that instead of letting this water wash out to sea, let's flow it through California and let everybody benefit from it.
Now, on the electric mandates, there was an interesting development. Before the Trump administration took over, the electric truck mandate got canceled. Right?
Yes, California's Air Resources Board rescinded their waiver request from the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. And they had several requests on the table. Some had already been passed related to passenger vehicles. And this one just didn't get through, was not approved in the Biden administration. And so what CARB told us was that out of a fear that the Trump administration would come in and just deny the request, they pulled the request off the table. Now, there is an interesting side angle to this story as well, because there's multiple ways you can achieve these objectives. You can go to the federal government or the EPA and you can request these regulations or these waivers to make stricter rules for air quality or other environmental quality rules. Or you can go to private industry and you can make deals with auto manufacturers. And the question now is, what strategy does CARB have here? We've seen in the past, in the first Trump administration, where CARB did go to the auto manufacturers and basically bypass the administration and said, well, we'll achieve our goals anyways, even though it's not a federal regulation. If all the manufacturers comply, we can still do this. So there's one element that we could still see some move towards some of these proposals or some of these agendas. It just wouldn't be through federal regulations. It would be through business instead.
So do you think the electric truck mandate will continue? How do you think it will work?
It looks like the electric truck mandate's dead for now. And part of the reason it died, or it's not doing well in the moment, is that it was just really difficult to comply with. We talked to industry experts, we talked to trucking company owners, we talked to manufacturers, and it was just the idea of transitioning to trucks. These are heavy-duty trucks we're talking about, like 18-wheelers, things that are pulling massive amounts of weight, where you really need heavy-duty chassis. You need really, it's technology that almost doesn't even exist yet in terms of the zero emission. Yeah. Yes. So when we talked to people, there was a lot of concerns about if there was a forced transition, that the market wasn't ready for it yet. The state doesn't have the charging infrastructure. There's not enough of the actual trucks or the batteries available. Even if you had the money and could afford to transition, you can't just order these trucks like you could order traditional ones. So there were a lot of concerns on both sides, even from some of the environmentalists, about, are we moving too fast, trying to force compliance with things that are impossible to comply with? And CARB, just kind of reading the tea leaves there, just pulled the order so that Trump couldn't come in and just initially reject it. Doesn't mean that this is gone per se, but it's definitely stalled. The trucking industry was going to have to move quickly. Now they have some time. They can save money for investment, or they can reevaluate their strategies moving forward.
What do a neurosurgeon, a country artist, and a television and radio host have in common? They all saw the writing on the wall. Big banks sharing your financial information with big government. Join them as owners in Old Glory Bank, the pro-America online bank that protects your privacy, security, and liberty. Invest today at own.oldglorybank.com.
Travis, on the energy side, there has been a big initiative in California to go towards renewable energy, wind and solar, maybe some hydro, but the smaller ones, but really wind and solar, going away from fossil fuels. Now, with Trump presidency, what do you think is going to happen? There's some initiatives, right, to change this, right?
Definitely some initiatives, and Trump is 100% opposed to wind farms. In his opinion, they're inefficient, ineffective, and create more problems than they solve. And part of these are these massive turbines, which it becomes a challenge. These things are huge, like as long as a football field, and they don't decompose readily. So this is They're almost going into like the heartland of America and creating these large graves for these wind turbines. Trump is looking to minimize or diminish wind as a power source in the U.S. He's also mentioned the impact to marine life. And this is, we don't know yet.
Because we were doing a lot of offshore wind, like federal government was doing a lot of offshore wind off the shores of California, right?
Yes, and California has a huge plan. If you look at what the legislature did in the last 2 years, the investments and all of the infrastructure planning for offshore wind in California, this is a major plan. And it's also groundbreaking. Like when we've talked to some of these manufacturers, what they're trying to do off California, this is unprecedented. So you have skeptics on both sides, some that are saying that this isn't even feasible, others that just really want to push forward with this. The Biden administration was funding it. They were making all the moves toward creating this offshore wind farms in California. Trump is pointing to the farms that are already on the East Coast and saying that there's warning signs coming from those that should dictate how we create new policies going forward. He says the marine life, the inefficiencies, like it's the whole ineffective and potentially damaging situation as he sees it. Yet California and some other states are really all in terms of solar and wind. They see this as the future. They're looking at what they describe as a carbon-free energy production system that's really what they're invested in ideologically and financially. That's the path they're moving forward. We did have a really interesting conversation with Governor Newsom last month. When we look at AI centers, the artificial intelligence data centers in California, and these data centers as they're coming about, they use a ton of power. And so there was a really interesting study that came out that showed that by 2030, California could have more air pollution from AI centers than from all the vehicles on the road. Well, we asked Newsom about this, and he mentioned that one of the possible solutions could be small modular nuclear reactors. Now, this is something we've been hearing from the other side, and we've talked to MIT scientists for 2 years now. We've been really following these small nuclear batteries. So it's like a nuclear power plant, but it's much easier. It's a smaller footprint to set up. You can set one up, and then you can link them so that if you set one up and then need more power, you just create another one. So in the southeast of the country, we're seeing quite a bit of innovation and move toward this. But until Newsom mentioned it to us last month, I had never heard anyone in California say anything about how we could get more nuclear power in the state. But just the fact that Newsom's willing to mention it, and the fact that Trump is really, he's set on this AI that the U.S. needs to dominate, that we need to create these data centers, that somebody's going to have this technology, so it might as well be us. And because California is so well positioned in the industry, this opens up massive potential for the state in terms of new energy development. If we do get small modular nuclear reactors, if we could create one of these and prove that it works at a data center, we could then see them spread so that other communities have access to power. So maybe solar and wind isn't the only way California is going to get power in the future. It's possible that was just the transition as new technologies catch up, that was just a phase that we went through as we go to a truly clean energy future.
California gets a lot of its oil from foreign countries, and the state is not issuing permits for drilling, and a lot of it comes from Kern County. Do you think that will change because now some of it is on federal land, right?
Yes, I would say that based on Trump's statements, we should definitely see more energy production in California as you said, on the federal lands, on the sides where he does have some influence. He's also really taken a stance that one of the other orders he signed was to protect Americans from inflation, to really lower the cost of living. And he's vocalized how he's going to do this is by addressing and tackling the cost of energy, which he says is the root cause of inflation. That by lowering the price of gasoline, electricity, diesel fuel, by getting these more into a normal balance, or by lowering the price of energy, we thereby lower the price of goods. And that's where we could really see something in California. Other states are admittedly going to be much more open to Trump's ideas of energy production. California, as you mentioned, in Kern County, has tremendous energy wealth and resources, both on our land and off the coast. Biden, in his last days, blocked any coastal drilling, oil and gas production, but we'll see what President Trump does. It's possible he opens back some of these. It's also, as he implements his policies, his main goal is to lower gas prices. So in California, we have our own issues when it comes to gas prices. We have CARB, the regulatory agencies that they have policies that make gas prices go up. And we're right now, as of January 1st, CARB's new policies have taken effect. So we have on one side what lawmakers tell us is California policies pushing gas prices higher, while federal policies are trying to pull them down. Now, how these two meet in the middle is going to be interesting. And that's really where California could have a say. If national gas prices come down on the wholesale level, but our regulatory prices keep increasing, Californians might not see much relief at the pump, even if prices come down across the nation.
How about the train project? Like there's some funding coming from, and this has been kind of it's not been going well. How is that coming along? What's going to happen to the train from San Francisco to that?
It's an ambitious project. The HighSpeed Rail it's way over budget. The Biden administration did kick in some federal funding before he left office. However, Trump has signed an order and established the Department of Government Efficiency, also known as DOGE. And what DOGE wants to do is cut what they see as wasteful spending. And the Trump administration is on the record calling high-speed rail a financial boondoggle. And when they look for projects to bring back money or to help reduce the national deficit, the high-speed rail could be high on the chopping block. We haven't heard anything directly from President Trump yet, but when you look at the comments he's made in the past, when you look at Republican lawmakers and the general consensus of the high-speed rail, Senator Roger Nilo and others have expressed concern that the cost overruns are just too much, that they've deemed it a track to nowhere, and just said that it's essentially throwing good money after bad at this point, because we don't have any idea of what it would actually cost. We had our initial cost projections. We've now run into all kinds of problems, acquiring land, issues with the land, all kinds of things, track stability, all kinds of issues were underestimated when we were initially doing the cost projections. And so now, even though we've thrown these billions at this project, nothing is really done. They just held their ceremonial laying of the first spikes last month, but no track has really gone anywhere yet. And if the federal money doesn't materialize, it'll be very difficult, if not impossible, for California to realize the dream of having high-speed rail.
There's another order that could impact California, and one of them is that you mentioned DOGE, and there's another initiative that could impact California is federal workers have to go to the office, right?
Yes, and this has been a serious issue in terms of office workers ever since the pandemic. So when everybody went home, or almost everybody in their offices went to work from home, only a small percentage actually came back.
Of federal employees, right?
Federal employees and private. And we're seeing this in the private industry. We're really seeing commercial real estate take a nosedive in terms of valuations, primarily due to office vacancy. And we've known those numbers are bad. Now we have Trump in office and Elon Musk helping him with Doge, and they're running through the numbers, and the vacancy rates in federal buildings is abysmal. Like these workers, many of them, from what they're telling us, 90% of the building is sitting there empty.
And they're still paying rent, right? They still have the offices.
And it's the General Services Administration is the government agency that leases all these buildings. It's the largest leaseholder in the United States, holds more than 360 million square feet across the country and more than 8,300 properties. And Trump has ordered all these workers back to the office. Doesn't mean they'll go back to the office. What we'll now wait to see is how these individual agencies and departments respond to Trump's order. We talked to Harry Claff. He's the U.S. president of real estate services firm Avison & Young, and he told us this could play out in two different ways. That if Trump orders everybody back to the office and these government employees come back in D.C. and in there's approximately 150,000 federal government employees just in California alone. If these employees do come back to the office, he said this could trigger similar action in the private industry, that we could then see other businesses forcing their workers or telling their workers they need to come back to the office as well, which would be a really nice boost for the office and commercial real estate industry, which has been struggling for basically the past 5 years. But on the other hand, he said if Trump orders these people back and they don't comply, And so now we see layoffs, or we just see the GSA make the decision under Doge and Musk and Trump's leadership that why are we paying leases for buildings where nobody's there? And some of these contractually, they are allowed to get out of these leases. If they start dumping leases, we could see millions of square feet of office space enter the market, which would have the reverse effect, that we could then see valuations further plummet, more security debts and financing across the board in office real estate right now are challenges. Whether it's finding a tenant or finding financing, it's very, very difficult. And there's some concern that if the federal government does start dumping leases, that it could really flood the market with real estate and we could see valuations plummet.
The way this special session went, so there's money being put aside to sue the federal government. There's kind of a war going on. In the middle of all this, the fires of LA happen, and now the state needs the help of the federal government. What are your thoughts on that? What does it look like?
Yes, so I've talked to lawmakers on both sides, and it's really interesting to hear both Democrats and Republicans alike say that maybe right now is the time for less combative rhetoric with the federal government and a little bit more time for collaboration and cooperation, because we both really need each other. And it's interesting when you look at how much money California gives into the federal government. The last statistics we have are 2022 was about $682 billion.
From taxpayers, right?
That the state paid in, or $692 billion that the taxpayers paid into the federal government. And then the state received about $609 billion in resources or in funding. So we're essentially providing to other states to the tune of $80 to $90 billion every year. California's taxpayers and their money is benefiting other states. Now we're in a situation where we need federal taxpayer money. The losses are uncalculated at the moment, but estimated at $50 billion plus for the Palisades and Eaton fires, and federal money is needed. So we've talked to Republican Assembly Leader James Gallagher, and he was offering an olive branch to the governor while at the same time saying that we need to do this with the president. We all need to come together and recognize that we have shared values, we have shared goals, and come together on this instead of battling. And it remains to be seen how the Trump administration and the Newsom administration will be able to navigate this. But right now, the state does need federal money. Biden had promised the money. He had even promised it moving out 6 months for the firefighting efforts, but there's going to be a lot in terms of rebuilding, infrastructure costs, just general resource and funding aid that the state really needs. And what Gallagher told us was it's just completely misguided that as here we are looking for $2.5 or $3 billion in state money to help fire recovery and prevention efforts, that at the same time we're talking about spending $25 million to sue the president that we really need as a partner.
California has had a lot of laws on the gender side of things, on the transgender and teaching in schools. Now that's going to change, or there's a new initiative?
Yes, Trump issued an executive order declaring that there are only two genders, male and female. And while this in and of itself doesn't have much of an implication to California, it's some of the details in his order where he's basically telling colleges, universities, and school districts that if you allow a man to compete in women's sports, regardless if they consider themselves transgender, then you could lose Title IX funding. And Title IX funding goes back decades, but this was federal funding which was meant to put female athletics on a more level playing field with male sports. So the male sports have always had more funding. Some of this goes back to TV contracts, and there's business sides to all of this. But the federal government was cognizant of, we want to give females a chance at athletics, and we want to make sure there's funding there. So that's the Title IX funding. And so now that there's men essentially competing in some of these women's sports as transgender athletes, the federal government is saying, they haven't laid down a date, but they are threatening that if you continue to allow this to occur, you could lose Title IX funding. That could have serious implications for California. Administrators across the state undoubtedly are looking at this and talking to legal experts and determining how best do we navigate this. Do you tell the transgender athlete, you're not playing on the women's team because we want to make sure we get federal funding? That's the negotiating tool that Trump's put on the table here. How it plays out remains to be seen. Senator Scott Wiener, he is an openly gay representative. He's been a champion of transgender rights legislation. So it was natural that he would oppose this. but he came out and said that this is essentially saying that these trans individuals just don't exist. So there is pushback both from Bonta, from the governor, and from certain lawmakers on this. But the implications will likely be more for the schools in terms of the Title IX funding.
Travis, you've been reporting in California, you've been covering California state, and you've managed to stay pretty balanced with all sides of the state, whether they're Republicans, Democrats, and even on the federal side, you've covered the Trump administration a little bit. How do you manage to respect everybody and they respect you as well?
Well, I think the key is just, like you said, is to have that respect. One is to do your research so that you understand the issues and the topics at hand. And the other is to recognize that everyone has an opinion. And that even if we don't agree, even if our opinions are not the same, if politically two people are completely opposite, when you start to really look at what they're trying to achieve, a lot of times you'll see the common ground. And that's always been my strategy, or my goal is when I'm talking to someone, is to find that common ground. And we're very fortunate to be in the media. We get to talk to subject matter experts. So I'm always appreciative of the opportunity to pick somebody's brain while at the same time understanding where they're coming from. What's their perspective? How do they see something like this? Or why do they see something like this? And what are they trying to achieve? And it's that last part, what are they trying to achieve, that I can be interviewing a Democrat or an independent or a Republican, and yes, they're going to give me their rhetoric and their talking points, but when I really look at what they want, we want the same things. It's just building those communication skills and those networking skills to recognize that this isn't me against you or him against them or he against she. It's how do we come together and communicate and achieve our common goals? And politics is partisan. So I don't judge a politician for giving me partisan rhetoric. If I ask him a question, I understand he has an agenda. She has an agenda. She has something that she needs to achieve, either with this bill or this legislation or this press conference, that it's not personal. And that when you look at this left versus right paradigm, behind the scenes, a lot of these people are friends. This is not this like evil, I don't like you or I'm not going to be cordial with you atmosphere. A lot of these people are just have a difference of opinions on the floor, so they can come across as being combative. But behind the scenes, they're cordial, they're colleagues, we're all humans, we're all compassionate, loving human beings, and we all have a goal to create a society that is better for all of us. And it's just recognizing that one person's talking point or someone else's idea isn't necessarily the end-all be-all. It's just a step to get to where we need to be. And that's what's always helped me.
Travis, you mentioned this is a very emotional environment. Like, people have opinions and it gets emotional, and then politicians behind the scene, they're okay, they're friends. But then in the social media, it becomes very toxic. You learned to navigate this by respecting everyone. How did you learn that?
Well, this is something instilled by my parents, definitely. So I had a father who was in the military who taught me that the three most important things are dignity, honor, and respect. And so these are core values that I was just raised with, that you treat everyone exactly how you would like to be treated. You show everyone respect and honor, and you treat everyone with dignity. And to me, this is just common sense. Like, that's just how I was raised, that you don't expect things from people. You do what you're supposed to do. You meet them on their terms. And that, to me, is where the toxic environment can be overcome. Once people recognize that this hateful message or whatever it is I'm putting out isn't me, like that has no relation to me and is not going to benefit me. I'd like to say it's a divide and conquer strategy that other people use on the masses to make it easy. So this toxicness isn't necessarily self-produced. Some of this is taught. It's bad behavior that is taught from our peers, that we see these people attacking each other, and then so we mimic other people might mimic some of this poor behavior. But it's a recognition that all of our words, all of our thoughts have meaning, have value, and actually carry weight, that we start to understand that I need to use my time wisely, I need to treat everybody with respect, and I need to calm down or bring some civility to this toxic environment. If we all just took 1 second to just slow down and ask, what can I do to help myself and help my community, the toxic environment disappears immediately. That's my opinion.
Travis Gillmore, reporter for Epoch Times in California. It was great to have you on California Insider.
Always a pleasure, Siamik. Thank you so much for having me.